So, how old is too old for those dinosaur computers, right? When are they obsolete? What makes them really stop working and just absolutely not be usable? How long do they last for? So, yeah, let's dig into this. Now, I don't have a lot of visual aids on this, so it's going to be mostly me talking with that one screen. So if you wanted to minimize it, do something else and listen, that's fine. I don't have a lot of visual on this. I'm just going to explain it as I know it. I have some very old computers in my fleet. Some of those are back to the 70s, and they still work fine. Computers can absolutely stop working if they do break or have a chemical breakdown. Some of the onboard components could eventually just stop working. There are certain components that you can replace, like the motherboard batteries. They're only good for a few years, but you can replace those many times. You can replace those. A lot of times they're little button cell batteries. You can pull those out, plug in new ones, and they'll last another several more years. They do count computers to be obsolete once they're off the shelf, and that's because they're already building something new by the time it gets to you. But I count it as being obsolete whenever it no longer does what I need it to do. And usually when it's obsolete for one department, I move it to another department. I move it to another thing that I'm going to do with it. So I have a whole bunch of different things that I use computers for. Sometimes I'm developing on some of them. Some of them are just utility computers. I've got all kinds of different computers that I run. And so when it's no longer good here to be my high-end web browser and browse around, do all my fancy stuff online, or to do any type of gaming, if I was going to do that, if it doesn't play my games anymore, well, then that's just fine. I'll move it into something else. I'll turn it into more of a utility computer, a data entry computer, or some other type of terminal that it will become. So it depends on how well you take care of them as well. Not getting them too hot does help. If you don't let them absolutely bake in the heat, that will increase the various different damages that they can get. And not working them to the point where they're absolutely melting down. If you're working it too hard, yeah, it's not going to last as long. But it's really obsolete when it doesn't do what you need it to anymore. At least that's what I figure on. So when it either stops working completely or just doesn't do. Now, what makes it not do what I need it to do? A lot of times that deals, sometimes it's with system requirements that it doesn't meet the current gaming needs or whatever else. Maybe it's not fast enough for what I need today. But what your computer is built as, it doesn't really lose that. It's only losing that compared to everything else out there. So most of my old computers, they don't really access a lot of the mainstream websites and stuff like that. They're not heavily used with networking outside of my own environment. They work on a controlled environment. They work on stuff that's all designed to use legacy protocols and stuff like that. So that's why they're able to get away with being so old. Because comparatively, they're still working with the same computers that they were made to be used with for a long, long time. But once you can no longer run the software, that's usually what it is once you're communicating with other computers out there and you can no longer run your software that you need to run, your web browser, let's just say, in this case. You like to use the web browser on high-end sites that require a whole lot of the special stuff, all that special foo-foo and fluff that they put out there on the internet. And they need all these fancy animations and scripts and Flash and all this other crazy stuff. And as they upgrade that, you need to upgrade your browser to support that. When your browser is no longer able to support that, it's not going to work. But you could update your browser, provided that your operating system, your main version of Linux or Windows or Apple or whatever operating system that you're running on, will support that browser. So provided that that main operating system supports your browser, then you can continue to work with your various different programs. Then we're going to go and look at something else that's going to happen, that sometimes you can update that software and sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're going to deal with some of your newer software that maybe does not fit. Maybe you need to upgrade your version of the operating system, but it needs more hard drive space than what you can put in that old computer. And the hard drive is already maxed out for what the motherboard can handle. So there's all these system components that depend on something else and require more from these other things. A newer operating system is usually going to be larger. It needs more system resources from that computer. And therefore, you can only upgrade your operating system so far. Then you've got to switch out your hardware. Sometimes you can do that in part. You can just change out a hard drive. But sometimes you get to the point where you just, you've got the maximum hard drive that the motherboard will support. So you can't upgrade that hardware anymore. And then, the same thing happens also with the browser as well. You get to that point where you've upgraded your browser so far and it says, we don't have anything more that will be supported by that operating system. That's when you're upgrading your operating system. So as you make those upgrades, your computer will extend its life as much as you can, but it'll only go so far if you're needing it to continue to work on the communication with everything else out there like that. But if you're working on more of, if it's just going to be a project computer and you don't really need to browse the internet, you don't need to do all this other stuff, and you're fine with your old programs, you're fine with having the old version of stuff and working with the older versions, well, then that's just that just works great. You can keep that computer around. That's what I've done. I've got some computers that are probably about 50 years old and they work fine. So are they obsolete as soon as you get them? Not by my standards. Are they obsolete after a few years? Maybe to browse the internet, maybe to do really high-end stuff, but a lot of your older, there's a lot of websites out there that they're not with the update movement, and they do work more with a legacy interface. And those guys, you can continue to use those services for many years to come. Some of those computers, I can use my 10-year-old or even 20-year-old computers to access those, and they work. Just depends on the site, depends on how it's made. So that's my take on how long computers last. So thank you for watching.